papers now. Joining us this morning is busy behind the desk, former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, alongside the Olympic athlete Chris Akabusi. A very good morning to both of you.
Morning.
We just went through the front pages, two very clear stories leading. Let's start, we've got to, with the World Cup final. Take us through the front page of the Times.
Yeah, what a fantastic final it was. I mean, in the first half, it appeared that France didn't really turn up, and Argentina were all over France. But then in the second half, France came back with a vengeance. Their manager made a couple of great changes, and all of a sudden it exploded. There are two protagonists in Messi and Mbappe, and I love Alan McCoy. Apparently in a commentary said that we've had the first hat-trick where the ball actually went over the line, sort of as a little slight at Sir Jeff Hurst. Yeah, absolutely right. But what a great final. And
they squeezed every minute out of it.
Every single out. It went to extra time where another couple of goals were scored. So it was 2-2, then it 3-2 to Argentina, then 3-3 to France. It was really edge on the seat stuff. And then, unfortunately, when I say unfortunately, it had to go down to penalties. And I don't want to say that France lost their bottle, but their younger players weren't able to maintain the focus required to get it over the line. But it was a great game. One team had to win, and I think, on balance, Argentina were the best team. What I don't like is this idea of trying to make it Messi and Mbappe, because it was two phenomenal teams, and they were, France was so in the second half they were so marauding, and they're young up and coming midfielders, all over Argentina, and Argentina it was a team effort. But yes, Messi is going to be the Golden Ball player, their best player in the tournament, and he's finally got his World Cup medal.
Good. Now then, Messi was superb. Somebody who wasn't quite so sharp, Mr. Gary Neville.
Can I just carry on talking about Messi, please? I mean, and the pictures of him with his little boys are amazing. Can you imagine being Messi's little boy? Can you imagine if you're rubbish at football and Messi is your dad, and it's like, I just would rather go and be a ballet dancer or something, Dad?
Well, I mean, if Messi is your dad, you're going to be rubbish at football, aren't you?
Even
if you get to the Premier League.
It's like, David Beckham's kids, the best kid there is his daughter who's the best footballer. In any case, let's talk about Gary Neville. For anyone who isn't aware, what did he say that's caused such a stir? Right, OK, do I have to talk about Gary Neville, don't I? Right, OK, so front page of the Daily Mail. Right, OK, Gary Neville has sparked fury by comparing striking UK workers with migrant labourers in Qatar. Now, 6,500 people, according to the human rights campaigners, died building those stadiums. There was one horrific story about a young lad called Mohammed who was not much older than Mbappe, by the way. I think he's about 23 years old. He was staying in substandard accommodation and the room flooded and he was electrocuted. Now, how dare Gary Neville compare the striking workers that live in a democracy like we have in the UK? OK, I know it's not perfect, I know the nurses deserve more money, but how dare he compare striking workers in this country and our government, which, OK, not great, but they're doing their best, to a country where being homosexual can have you literally sentenced to death. Being a woman is, well, you may as well just not exist. And they actually use modern-day slavery to build these stadiums. The hypocrisy of Gary Neville, he said this live on air, by the way, the hypocrisy of him saying that when he himself is expecting, we don't know exactly how much, but it's going to be quite a bit of money to work for a Qatari-based broadcaster. He could have made points about human rights without going over there and taking that blood money. I mean, how dare he? Sorry.
ITV had some quite stern words to distance themselves from it. They said Gary Neville was expressing his own personal views in the context of a discussion about the treatment of workers in Qatar within a live broadcast. His views are his own and were not endorsed by ITV. Put them in a pretty tricky situation as well.
Yeah, no, it did, absolutely. And, they can't be happy with him because this was about, as Chris has just said so eloquently, didn't watch it because I wouldn't watch these games, obviously, because of the human rights issues, unlike Gary Neville. But it was a great game of football. It was a good end to a completely tarnished tournament. And, you know, you look at the pictures of Messi celebrating with his wife and his little boys, and you think, great, fantastic. And then Gary Neville has to use it to score a cheap political point about this government. It's not what that's about.
Mr. Champagne Socialist.
I've got to admit, though, if I had been offered a six-figure sum to be broadcasting in Qatar, I'll be there. So
would you, Chris?
Well, we're there anyway. We're there. I just saw Paul, didn't I? I just saw Paul. He's there. You know, people go to work. I mean, you can't live in the UK and not work with people at Qatar. They're in banking.
They own most of London.
Yeah,
they own most of London.
Yeah.
I mean,
so we're working with them every day anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, you know, you can flag up some of the issues. I agree with you. Trying to compare Qatar and their human rights record with United Kingdom and our human rights record is a bit grotesque. We're not even a bit grotesque. It's wrong. But you know, on the point, would you work? Yeah, I would, because GB PLC works with them every day, and the Qataris are making their way into Premier League football. They might even be up to by my club, I've heard. West Ham. So
our club.
Do you think the coverage that you watched struck the balance right then, with the tensions of the complications of, you know, rights of people in that country, and as we've talked about already at length, the depths of people who built those stadiums with the game? Did you watch it and think, I think they've got this right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't watch it wall to wall, but I think Gary Lineker and the BBC, if I may mention them, they made a great start on the very first day, where they didn't sort of broadcast all the paraphernalia and the excitement and the lights and the pipes and and they talked about the human rights record just to place it in context. What you were saying, Dawn, we must remember that, you know, Qatar is playing, it's got human rights issues, and this is where the World Cup is being played. But then football won the day. And I'm afraid to say, you know, last night, when we all watched the football, what the Qataris wanted, they got. Sports washing. You know, it's been billed as the best World Cup ever. So in 4, 8, 12 years' time, won't be talking about human rights. We'll be talking about Argentina, Messi, hand of God, best World Cup ever.
Well, I just hope now that after the tournament has finished, that women and gay people in Qatar now feel safe to walk the streets and live their lives and love who they want to love. And women have that independence, but it's not going to happen.
It'll take a while. It won't happen overnight, obviously. But there was some basically marketing guru from Qatar. I saw him on TV espousing the idea that, you know, we've learned and we're understanding and we're moving forward. It won't happen overnight, but let's hope it will happen eventually.
All right, Chris, that's a little nearer to home now. You've picked a story out the Express about the nurses' strike.
Yes, yeah. So, when it comes to the nursing strike, the Royal College of Nursing General Secretary Pat Cullen, she said, look, we really do want to get this over the line. You know, we are here to make sure that the NHS works, that our nurses are happy going to work, and that the public are safe. But we've got to a stage where we cannot but stand up for our rights, but we're open to negotiation. So the 19% offer, for example, basically what she's saying through the window is, we don't really want 19%. Now, I'll tell you what I heard the other day, and maybe you can get me if I'm wrong, that since 2012, the public pay review body have given our ministers a 28% increase, all right? Which, I mean, I don't think that our ministers are overpaid, to be honest. So I'm not having a go at that. But they've had a 28% increase since 2012, and our nurses and many of the people who are striking have had a 20% decrease. You know, you can understand. Again, I'm not in their situation, but if I the word is sitz in Leben, if I put myself in their situation in life, if I try to understand that you are a nurse and you go there and you want to give your best, but you're working all hours that God sends, you haven't got the equipment, you're doing double sessions. You know, I know I'm very close to a nurse who has to do care patient plans. And she's supposed to do a dozen, and she's out there doing 30. Well, that's great until she gets something wrong. And it's your grandma that gets the wrong. So that's what they're arguing for. Give us more money and let's do the job properly.
Dawn, it does seem like the door is open from both sides. The Express have got comment from Pat Cullen, who's the General Secretary of the Nurses Union, alongside a comment piece from the Health Secretary. Both of them are saying, let's talk, let's try and salvage some of this. How optimistic are you that an agreement could be come to before Christmas?
Not very. I must admit. I mean, it's, what I'm confused about here, Rosie, is both sides, not just in the nurses' strike, but in the rail strike, all sides saying we the government and the people that make these decisions aren't talking to us, and yet the government is saying, no, we are talking to you. So both sides can't be right.
Well, yeah, but they're not talking about what matters most: money.
Yeah, isn't that the issue though? Because I mean, there are a lot more nurses than there are ministers, and it's going to cost, I think was it £9 billion for this pay rise? That's £1,000 for every household. Pat Cullen here is saying she doesn't want a miracle, but she wants a gift. That's a big gift.
Well, it is, but again, these same people have observed since the global financial crisis in 2008 how we found the money for the banks and the top bankers. They've seen how, through austerity measures, when we squeezed our workers, we found the money when we went on this Brexit trail, which I'm a supporter of. They've seen how, when we went through lockdown, we found the money for the lockdown crisis. They've seen how, as a result of lockdown, we found the money. I've lost my thread. But anyway, we keep on finding the money for other things, but not for us.
Nurses will say, what about us?
Yeah.
There is then going to be a consequence on the type of provision that can be offered. Yeah. Dawn, if we move now into the eye, they're talking about what paramedics are warning of will happen as a result of the strike action.
Well, absolutely. It's like open another advent calendar window, isn't it? And there's another strike behind it, or occasionally 3 strikes. The eye is very cheerful front page today. You're all going to die, basically. Everyone's on strike, just sums it up. But this is, they have an interview with a paramedic, and he is saying that, it's not unusual. I mean, 35%, it's really staggering, 35% of ambulance workers said they've handled cases where delays, often up to 8 hours, have led to the death of patients, and they often turn up. Not through their doing, because it's just not enough of them. Hospitals are bed blocked, etc., etc. So they've turned up and the patient has died. So they're breaking down doors where someone who phoned them 8 hours ago with chest pains, who lives on their own, is now lying on the floor dead.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, they're talking about that kind of thing is going to be increasing, and they're warning about the elderly won't get an ambulance.
But the weird thing is like we're responding to emergency calls. Well, surely the point of having an ambulance is it's an emergency. So it's just a mess. But you just really, all of us, I think, watching and listening this morning, just get around the table, talk, and try and sort it out. As Pat Cullen from the Nurses Union said, she goes, we don't want to drag this out into January.
No.
We don't want people dying because of this strike, and it is going to happen.
OK, let's, on a bit of a softer note now, Chris, the omnipresent Meghan and Harry documentary. What do you got for us?
So,
Gary Neville and Harry and Meghan, I just want to shoot myself on a Monday morning.
I mean, so hands up, I've not watched the Netflix. I will buy the book, The Spare. Look, I do have a soft spot, so I'm not anti-Meghan and Harry, but I don't understand where this is coming from. We want a royal apology, and it's a son, so I'm not taking I'm not being rude, but I'm not taking the headline. I think the headline has probably been taken out of context. It might have been a side discussion, because what they're saying is, Ngozi Fulani, I'd have a lot to talk about there, because Ngozi is an Igbo name. That's my motto when my people come from. And Fulani is a Northern European name, so anyway, I digress.
So what do Harry and Meghan want an apology for?
But that's exactly the question.
Yeah.
What are you looking for an apology for? Now, I don't know what they're looking for an apology for. And the firm has said, well, what are we going to be apologising for? Now, the fact that families and that brothers fall out, it happens to us in all of our families. So we can't be apologising because my brother shouted at me. So surely not. But on the other side, I do think that we need to step a step back, because when you start demonising, I mean, there's a picture of Meghan here and she's crying now. I know she's an actress.
She cries a lot.
Yeah, but then she might be very sad. And, and we talk about mental health stuff, and it's quite clear that between the both of these people, there's a massive mental health doom loop going on. Now, it's not for me to sort of self-analyse, but we need to be very careful because you can push people over the edge. And there's a clip of her saying, well, what do they want from me? This is not just, it's my life, etc., etc. So basically saying, there's no way that the firm can give you an apology. That would be ridiculous. But we on the media, I include myself, even though I don't get on board, we've got to be very careful. Now you could say, well, they're putting themselves out there. Nobody asked them to do Netflix, or there's 88 million reasons why they did the Netflix. No one's asked him to do the book. But we do take things out of context. And we've got to understand that in the end, there are two people who've obviously got a vortex of psycho-emotional issues going around them, and we just need to be careful, I think.
Dawn, do you think we have lost empathy in how we look at this story?
Yes. I because I had to, I forced myself to watch 6 hours of this.
God.
6 hours of my life I'm not going to get back.
Have you not watched any of it, Martin?
No.
None of it?
No,
Okay.
I've seen the trailers on the internet, and that would be my
That's
lot.
enough.
I don't want to give them a single penny of my money. That's what it is.
That sums it up, basically. It's, again, we were talking about the negotiations, right? Okay, just why are you washing so much dirty linen in public? All right, I get £88 million from Netflix, but if you want to make a TV programme about what is wrong with the British royal family, make a serious documentary. Do it in a way that you're making historical points that we can all go, well, actually, yeah, that's an interesting point about the royal family and the past and the future, etc. Not this washing your dirty laundry where you're slagging your entire family off, and that's all they're doing in this. And then, and talk. Why not just sit down in private and talk about it? And as you said, Chris, Harry came out with this marvellous quote, his brother screamed at him and he was terrified. You served in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You were terrified about having a row with your brother?
Yeah,
huh?
Come on. Yeah, wait back.
So it hasn't washed here.
No,
That's
not at all.
Should we just mention a very ridiculous story that's the end of our paper list, a real change in tone? Let's head to the Star. And have you ever shared your bed with a family pet?
Oh, my God.
I was wondering what you were going to say.
You were, because it's your story, Dawn.
Well, I write a column for this newspaper. I don't choose what goes on page one these days. But it's a Daily Star. It's trying to bring some light relief to sort of like everything that's going on at the moment. And there is a serious side to this story. Obviously, during the very recent cold snap, a lot of people have been cuddling up with their pets, mostly dogs. And basically, the dogs are overheating under the duvets, and some of them have sadly died. So the serious message here is be careful, what you do with your pets during the cold snap. Try not to cuddle them too much in bed. Where am I going with this story? But yeah, so
the cold snap, thankfully, seems the worst of it does seem to be over, which is a really positive news story for people who have been really worried about their thermostats still going to be quite cold, but it's not at all that kind of below freezing temperatures that you've had. So maybe that story will become redundant.
I think there's another cold snap coming. But don't sleep with your dog.
Dawn, thank you very much. Chris, thank you
guys.
both. They'll be back in the studio with us in about an hour's time to go through more stories in the papers.